Recently, I watched a Superman movie, and I have to say, it worked. Now, just to clarify, this is by no means a perfect movie, but it was able to hit a part of me that many superhero movies have not been able to as of late. Here, I'm going to dissect the areas in which Superman succeeded and how such a movie could just be the answer to the superhero fatigue so many people claim to feel. Firstly, we have to give credit to the casting department for this movie. I was completely in love with having Henry Cavill as Superman in The Man of Steel, but David Cornswet was able to bring out such a different look at this character. His raw emotions when expressing his discontentment with the system was really a pleasure to watch. Supporting cast such as Guy Gardner, Mr. Terrific, Lois Lane, etc., genuinely filled the screen with so much style and emotions. However, the real spotlight went to Nicholas Holt, in my opinion. I mean, he was always an amazing actor, but he brings out the envy and disgust of Lex Luthor to screen without relying on cartoonish quips. This dynamic between Superman and Lex Luthor was at the center of this movie, and this department was perfectly executed. Now, coming to the main subject as to why this movie is essentially what the comic book movie industry wanted, it's that it really nails what a superhero is. When you think about what a superhero is, the first figure that comes into most people's mind would be Superman. Superman has come to not only popularize the hero, but to define it. He can be seen as the visual representation of the superhero archetype, if you will. In that sense, the expectation surrounding him was so great, and this movie delivers. This movie is filled with scenes of Superman saving people and even animals while actively fighting off the villain. And that is the point. A superhero is supposed to be a better version of a human, something that may seem impossible to reach, but still something to strive towards. To achieve this, he does not have to be a god or a messiah, he just has to be the best among us. Like the movie says, what makes Superman great is not his super strength, but his humanity. It's his higher sense of morality and kindness and conviction that really makes people look up to him, something we should all aspire to be. Now, the second thing that James Gunn did right was by taking a completely different approach with Superman when compared to the MCU movies. Many people have now spoken out about how superhero fatigue is the cause for such movies failing. They don't want to go to theaters to watch the same movie over and over again. Now, many individuals they say that these people are just hating for the sole purpose of hating. Well, some people may be, but we can still acknowledge that a real sentiment behind such critiques exists. Especially when it comes to the Marvel movies, their criticism may be right. Almost any movie you take from their catalog feels like every other movie that they made. When it comes to the tone, the setting, the story arcs, there really isn't much to differentiate them. One of the exceptions to this would be the Batman movie by Matt Reeves. Here we get a fresh perspective on Batman with a grounded, dark story. This was the kind of approach Zack Snyder attempted, but his movies failed to connect to the audience. While many may think that appealing to a mature audience with a grounded story would reduce the effect of superhero fatigue, James Gunn didn't. He chose to double down on what a superhero is like, and that's what made Superman great. With this, the movie feels very much like a comic book, filled with vibrant colors, exaggerated dialogue, and a decent mix of goofiness. In a way, this movie is a rejection of a culture that loves to value realistic art over the charm of a comic book. Speaking of rejecting culture, there's also another angle at which this movie achieves this. Something many people criticized within this movie was that Superman seemed weak and whiny. However, I do not share the sentiment. I do agree that the final monologue he had with Lex Luthor seemed a bit forced, but his emotional outburst throughout this movie actually added to the character. After all, if he were truly a good person at heart, would you not feel enraged by acts of evil around you? His care and concern for the people exceeds his wish to seem stoic and heroic. Furthermore, with many movies as of late, we are seeing a trend of this wounded villain, a man who was turned towards the dark side due to the injustices he or she faced in the past. While layered villains with rich backstories and deep motivations are good, it is always a nice change of pace to have a pure villain, a villain that stays on his high tower and looks at the world with contempt. He controls people and instigates war purely for selfish reasons. Compared to this, we get a protagonist that is willing to sacrifice himself even for a dog. Lex Luthor is a perfect example of absolute evil, and he stands as polar opposite to Superman. This creates a feeling of a classic superhero comic, and that was perfect. Now, in saying this, there were also some areas of the movie that seemed to be lacking for me. For one, the pacing of this movie seemed somewhat off. The events seemed to be happening too quickly, even though this movie is more than 2 hours long. It could be because Superman seemed to go over a huge story in a fairly quick manner. The movie rarely takes some time to breathe and let us feel the gravity of what is happening around them. To add to that, the way in which Mr. Terrific seems to solve the final battle did not feel as satisfying as it could have. The reason may be that it is hard to believe that the threat of Earth being eaten up from the inside got solved with such little difficulty. Still, the fight with Ultraman was exhilarating. Maybe this movie could have focused primarily on Superman, because within this movie, we are already exposed to a wide range of superheroes and evil entities. Even though individually they were all interesting and unique characters, especially Guy Gardner, it could have been smoother to have some of these characters introduced a little later into the DC universe. Another area that I was not a big fan of was the color grading of this movie. With the cast that is rich in color and style, this movie could have looked a lot better. I was actually interested in the bluish color that was prominent in the trailer. I know many people were not a big fan of it, but I was interested in it, primarily because it was not a dark and edgy blue. It was a bluish shade that some way reminded me of the color in the sky as the sun rises. It would have been nice to have a rich and golden hue to the movie, gradually taking over this bluish look. This could have been a great representation of what a hero is, and the hope and light that he brings to our world. However, this movie did not really commit to any color or hue, and the end product looks a little bit basic. This is ironic considering the fact that this is one of the most stylized comic book movies I have watched in a while. But at the end of the day, these are minor nitpicks. I am eagerly looking forward to the next installment of the DCU, especially since Gunn claimed that all movies will have their own tone and atmosphere. It would be interesting to see what this comic universe would lead to. I would especially like to see how Brave and the Bold will be different from the Superman movie. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.